Could the Toronto Maple Leafs be targeting a couple of familiar faces heading into the NHL trade deadline later this season? There's numerous reports that players like Kadri or Ryan O'Reilly might be on their radar. The odds of them trying to land one of those players as another center on their team is pretty good, according to the recent reports. We'll discuss those possibilities, plus other Leaf news today, including signing of Alex Nylander, an update on Matthew Knies, plus we got a big signing in Vegas for Brett Howden, and another big rumor as well about some offseason moves for the Red Wings that were close, but no cigar. We'll discuss all that and more coming up next. So, welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we got lots to talk about here today. Certainly, been a busy news day early in the day, especially regarding the Leafs and the Golden Knights. We'll discuss some of that stuff here. There is a dedicated video on the channel earlier with the other Leaf news, but we'll get into it here a little bit in case you haven't had a chance to get caught up here already. So, the Maple Leafs, of course, announced today that Matthew Knies is officially being moved to injured reserve. After Matthew Knies took that big hit from Zach Whitecloud the other night, it was pretty clear that he was injured, left the game to not return. You have to imagine it's likely concussion type symptoms that he's dealing with here. So he's officially on injured reserve, which means you have to miss at least a week of action. So it's no timetable yet on when he can return. Of course, we know the Leafs are without several other players right now. We know Matthews is out, Domi is out, but they've been doing just fine in all these players' absences. Now, one other big news story today is they signed Nylander. Yes, not William, but Alex Nylander is officially able to play on the Toronto Maple Leafs roster. Of course, if you recall, we broke some news back in the early part of the fall here when the season was just getting started that Toronto had signed Alex Nylander, except it was an American Hockey League only deal. They just did not have the roster space or the cap space to sign him to an NHL contract. So they signed him for the Marlies and the AHL. He's gone down there. He's done very well. Got 8 goals, I think it is, in 14 games. Played, real solid hockey like he's done in the American Hockey League for the past few stints he's had down there. Last year, of course, we know he had a good run in Columbus to finish out the season, and for whatever reason, they decided not to keep him. They cut him loose. So he, gets into the Leafs organization. A lot of hope that maybe he can get an NHL contract and get to play with his brother, and now that's happening. So the Leafs have signed Alex Nylander for the rest of the year, league minimum contract, and it is a one-way deal. So he will need waivers if the Leafs want to send him back to the American Hockey League. So I wonder what this means for a couple of things. One, obviously, is he going to be able to continue where he left off when he was last in the NHL? If he does, it should be a great move. Should work out well for him and the team. Should get some good production, and they won't have any reason to really think about sending him to the minors. Secondly, when the team gets healthy, what does it mean for some of these other guys? We already know there's a bit of a log jam. Some of the players coming up have done well. What does this mean for a young player like a Nick Robertson? Robertson had a long, basically a contract, almost like a holdout, but he did sign, of course, before the season started, but hasn't really lived up to that hype that he was going to continue to score and produce for the Leafs this year. He wanted a fresh start, hasn't gotten it. Maybe it'll come later if Nylander continues to play the way that he did in the NHL last year. Could he bump a guy like Robertson out of his spot? We'll see. Obviously, Pacioretty's on IR, for a bit here. He's going to be out for a while. Yarncroke's still out to start the year. David Kampfa's out. So this team may not look the same, when we get closer to playoff time as it does today with all these injuries. So hard to say what happens, but Alex Nylander is officially on a one-way deal for the Leafs, and will be able to play and have him, William, and Alex both on the roster. So I don't know if they'll get a chance to play in the same line. We'll have to see how Craig Berube feels about things, but he certainly earned the opportunity and got the contract now. So now we got to see how things pan out. Now, the other big signing today, of course, like I said, was Vegas announcing that they've extended Brett Howden on a 5-year deal. 5-year deal at $2.5 million per season. Howden, I guess, as many view him as a bottom 6 player, and for the most part, he is. He's been a third-line player quite a bit. Occasionally a fourth line, but usually a third. Sometimes he can be moved up as well. He's one of those versatile players that you can put in the top 6 if you need to. But if you have a deep enough team, he's probably on your third line. So for that kind of money, it's pretty fair. I think it's a good deal. I think he's got 8 or 9 goals for Vegas so far this year. So really considering how early in the season it is, if he can be a 20-goal scorer for them and make $2.5 million, I don't see anything wrong with that at all. It's pretty good value for the team, pretty good value for the player. He gets 5 years, which is, more term than you see a lot of middle six or third liners get. But if he can continue to play like the way he has and produce the way he has, it should be a real easy no-brainer contract that should work out well here for both sides. So obviously, that's a good piece of business there for Kelly McCrimmon and Vegas. Now, one other thing I came across today, a big rumor about Detroit. Now, we know that the Red Wings and Steve Yzerman didn't really do a whole lot in the offseason. There was a lot of rumblings, and apparently we got some speculation here. Part of it came from WSN talking about free agent moves that Yzerman almost made, but not quite. So the reports there, the rumors speculate that Yzerman was very much involved trying to sign Steven Stamkos and bring him to the Red Wings. Of course, we know he would know Stamkos quite well from Yzerman's time in Tampa. Definitely have a relationship there. But word was that they were watching that Stamkos situation very closely. Once it was determined 100%, because they kind of knew ahead of time that Tampa wasn't going to be able to make this work. He was going to hit free agency. They reached out and they offered pretty much the same deal that he got in Nashville, except they offered 3 years. Then the Predators came along, offered 4 years. So, of course, that's an extra year. Yeah, making the $8 million or whatever it is a year he's making. So, that's a lot of more money. So he comes back to Detroit. Yzerman doesn't have that much time. He, probably needs a decision here within the day. Reportedly, he went to ownership and wanted to give the 4 years, and they wouldn't sign off on it. Now, originally, the report was he talked to one of the Illiches and said that he wanted to give the extra year. They said, let me think on it. I'll get back to you. And then they never did. They never really did come back to the situation, which surprises me. I mean, I don't imagine Yzerman. For one, if you want to believe the rumor, it makes it sound like Yzerman might need ownership sign-off for more transactions than you think, which is surprising. Secondly, it's hard to imagine that they never got back to him. And if they weren't getting back to him, you think he'd be on the horn, trying to get an answer out of them, right? Trying to get this player signed. It's a big deal. So at the end of the day, though, they're very much involved with Stamkos, and they tried, and they got to basically get outbid by the Predators for an extra year because of ownership not wanting to go there. If that's believable, I do believe that they were in the mix for sure. I do believe that they made an offer. I don't know if that's the reason why it didn't work out. I guess we may never know, but that is the rumor that's out there, according to the guys at WSN. Also, some talk from other sources that confirm that they did indeed have trade talks with the Rangers around Jacob Trouba. We knew they had made the Jake Wallman trade. They were basically clearing space, and there was all the speculation the Rangers were going to either put Trouba on waivers or they were going to move him to a team like Detroit, who was believed to not be on his no-trade list. We don't know what happened here. I think basically the information got leaked out too early, and Jacob Trouba got wind of it. And when July 1st was rolling around, he had to update his list of teams to block with his no-trade, and I think he made sure that the Red Wings were on it. Normally, in the right situation, he probably wouldn't have done that. It's a state that I would suspect he would go to. Michigan is, I believe, home for him, so it's not like it's a place he definitely would never want to go to. But because of his family life and his wife being in her profession, in a medical residency and everything in New York, they didn't want to move and uproot their family, which I understand that, and I get all that. We don't have to rehash all that stuff, but essentially the fact is here is that Yzerman kind of gets a lot of crap for not doing a lot in the offseason, but he was very much in on Stamkos. They thought they were getting Trouba, and both scenarios kind of didn't work out for reasons almost beyond their control, if you want to believe that to be the case. Or maybe they just didn't really want to go more than 3 years on Stamkos. It's hard to say. And you know what? Look at the way Nashville's playing right now. They have picked it up a bit better, but, we'll see how later in the year we get a better idea how things worked out for Stamkos. But they may not be regretting it the most right now. So we'll have to wait and see where things go on that front. And of course, like I said, we got some big Leaf rumors I want to take a look at. Before we do that, though, I want to touch on a little bit on John Gibson. I know after the last couple of Oiler games, especially one against Minnesota, Stuart Skinner was not good. And I've seen some reports from Edmonton media suggesting that the Oilers are very much losing faith in Skinner, and that they may, even though all the reports have indicated that the Oilers are bound to make some moves and make the team better throughout the year, trying to be strong as possible for the playoffs. A lot of betting places still have them as the favorites to win the Stanley Cup, which is surprising given where they're at in the regular season right now. But goaltending has not been in place or a position that many people feel they're really looking at. But the way things have gone lately, I think there's a few reporters and insiders that are starting to kind of turn their opinion on that and thinking they may not have a choice if Skinner doesn't pick it up. There's some are not viewing him as a 1A anymore, as a start. He's more of a tandem or a 1B. But there's a lot of talk about John Gibson out of Anaheim. There's some believe that Gibson would waive to go to the Oilers and that they need to look into that as soon as possible. Now, that complicates things. I don't know what an Oilers trade with the Ducks would look like if they did pursue that. Clearly, they would need Anaheim to eat the full 50%. They might even need Anaheim to have a third team involved and to retain the additional 25, which knocks down the Oilers' commitment, of course, drives up their price as well. So interesting to see what they may do. Of course, we had previously talked about Gibson being a serious option for Carolina with their injuries and the fact that Freddie Anderson is going to be out for an extended time. And then, of course, the Avalanche as well. That might be a team to take a look at. So we'll have to see where that goes. But certainly, a scenario that is worth monitoring here. John Gibson, if he can play well enough here in the next little bit, could be an excellent trade candidate. The only problem is if you can't look at his body of work in the last 3-4 years and be like, oh yes, he's the savior, he's the answer, he's coming in, he's going to make Stuart Skinner look like, he's so much better than him. He's been in a declining performance for a long time. You can't expect John Gibson to play like he did when he was like 24, 25 years old. It's been a while. Could he refine that? Maybe, but you can't bank on it. It's an awful risk in my opinion. So we'll have to see where that goes on the Gibson front. Another team to watch as well is going to be Seattle. Now, I know Seattle's had an up-and-down season here. I do wonder about Philip Grubauer. I don't know that a trade is going to be super likely given his contract, but I think his future in Seattle after they extended Joey Decord definitely has some question marks on it. And if the Kraken are a team that's not in the mix at the deadline, which I'm suspecting they won't be, could be a team to watch as well for unloading a few players. I think Grubauer might be one. If they don't do that, I would look for potential buyout in the summer. The same thing we've heard rumors about Yanni Gourde. Now, some feel that even though Yanni Gourde is on an expiring contract and his role has been reduced in Seattle, then he may not necessarily be a player that the Kraken definitely want to move, that they may attempt to see if they can bring him back, on a shorter extension for less money than he's making today. So not a given that Yanni Gourde gets moved, but it is possible. And, of course, Captain Jordan Eberle, we saw leave the game the other night due to injury at a bad crash there into the boards. We now know the situation with Eberle is he needs surgery. He's going to be out for about 3 months. He's having pelvic surgery, which is a massive recovery. So that's not going to be good. He just named captain at the beginning of the season here. Plays a big role for that team in more ways than one. And now he's going to be gone for like 3 months. So that's terrible news for Seattle. So I suspect that Seattle, unfortunately, will be a seller this year at the deadline, and I do wonder about a few of those other players, but we'll have to wait and see. Time will tell, of course, on that front. And in Toronto, so the big rumors are what they're going to do at the forward position. That seems to be the main target. You don't hear much about goaltending. Wall's been good. Stolarz has been good. I think they're quite happy and content, barring some kind of weird injury or something we can't predict. That's not going to be an area of concern, I don't think, going into the playoffs. They do have plenty of D. We already saw a trade involving Timothy Liljegren earlier in the season. I think, unless, depending on how the year goes, could they make a depth move? Maybe. But right now, I think the biggest concern is in the forward group and the depth up front, especially down the middle. Tavares is having a good season. I think he's playing with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. Lost the captaincies in a final year of his deal. His future's uncertain. A lot of people have talked about how he's slowed down and whatever. And he's trying to prove people wrong, and he's doing a fairly good job with that, I must say. Tavares is a guy that you definitely don't want to bet against in most cases because he's been doing it his whole life, his whole career. So we shouldn't be surprised here, but. At the end of the day, you get a healthy Matthews back, hopefully, and then, the center position after Matthews has some question marks. There's belief that, a number 2 to number 3 center would be ideal for them to add sometime, maybe earlier in the year, but definitely before the deadline. That's the Leafs, by far, their biggest issue of depth is down the middle. So, a couple of names that have come up here in different instances. One from The Athletic and James Myrtle. He says he wouldn't rule out the possibility of them trading and bringing back former Leaf Ryan O'Reilly, who, of course, we know came to the Leafs in a trade 2 seasons back, signed a free agent contract the following summer, and went to Nashville. I think it was on, I believe, a 4-year deal, if I'm not mistaken. So, he still has a couple of years of term. His contract's very favorable. For what O'Reilly brings you, he's got a good contract. Now, the belief was that O'Reilly had no real desire to stay. He seemed pretty pumped about getting traded to Toronto in the first place. He's an Ontario kid. The family was excited. He was thinking, I'm hoping I'll be one of the guys to go back to Ontario here to the Leafs and help bring a championship. That's the goal because so many of these guys have come home to try to make it happen. And, it didn't work out. We saw... fairly early exit. They lose in the second round to the Panthers, right? They won the first round, which was good. O'Reilly was a good role for them, but then of course they ran into the juggernaut Panthers, and I think everybody kind of forgot about the first round success because of how poorly things went in round 2. At the end of the day, O'Reilly decided, I don't want to be here anymore, and there was a lot of talk that he definitely didn't want to go back. Now, what I'm hearing now is that a lot of that had to do with the fact that he just did not really get along well or see the vision of Sheldon Keefe. That Keefe was the main issue for him, that he didn't want to stay. It had nothing to do with the players or the teammates or the organization itself. Myrtle makes comments here saying that the front office still very much loves O'Reilly. We know Nashville has been a team that's underachieved this year. Now, one thing is if the Nashville Predators get things going and they're in the hunt for playoffs, I don't see this happening because, for one, they need more depth down the middle, not less. They don't have an abundance of centermen here. They can really afford to do this. They've been rumored to be one of the teams that are in the mix looking to add a centerman. But if they get to a point where they're out of it and they want to make a couple of bigger moves to shake things up, I could see that maybe being a possibility. I don't know what the Leafs would have to pay, but, it's a real possible thing here. I mean, you got to remember, like I said, the front office still really likes this guy. He played for Berube in St. Louis. They won a Stanley Cup together. I think Berube could be the difference maker, the influencer here to help bring him to Toronto, should that move be, a possibility. So I would not rule out that O'Reilly becomes their trade target if things continue the way they've gone, like they have early in the year for the Predators. Now, the other name that came up, this was on Sportsnet's Real Kipper and Bourne show with Nick Kyprios and Justin Bourne talking to former NHL GM and former Sportsnet personality Doug MacLean. MacLean's worked in the NHL for a variety of teams, jobs. He's been a president, a GM, around the game a long, long time. He's been a head coach, Florida, Columbus, etc. And he says that he thinks the Leafs need to go after a guy. They bring back another familiar face in Nazem Kadri. He says that that's, for him, the missing piece. Kadri very much could be a middle six center like O'Reilly. O'Reilly's tough to play against, not afraid to be physical, but Kadri's definitely the more of the, antagonist, if you will, gets under the other team's skin, just a different style. Now, in the past, when Kadri was younger with the Leafs, he was irresponsible and got himself suspended numerous times and kind of put the team in a bad spot, which is why they decided to part ways eventually. I think he's older, he's more mature, he's got his cup now from his time in Colorado. Calgary right now is in the mix. I don't know. Look, Calgary's not going to rush and make this kind of move. But again, later in the season, if the Flames are not in it and if the Leafs are willing to give them a good return, I can see them listening on guys like Kadri or Anderson, Uyghur. They have to keep some guys there, and they've shown that they can be a good team. They've got great goaltending so far from Dustin Wolf. And maybe Kadri becomes an answer. So one of these two familiar faces, it sounds like will be very much a target. Now, it doesn't mean that either deal is going to materialize. I don't think they're going to get both by any means. It would be one or the other. I almost think the O'Reilly deal might be more likely. I just think it's more likely right now that Nashville decides that, we need a different mix here, and that maybe he becomes available. Doesn't have trade protection and has a good contract. So I don't know, again, what they would want, but they'd have to give up something substantial or, something good to entice the Predators for sure, right? So, the Flames right now are a team that's more in the mix. It's really early. I mean, both of these teams' fate could change drastically over the next couple of months, and a lot of it's going to depend on where they're at, the cost, what the Leafs are willing to pay, etc. But does it make sense to you that these two former Leafs are big-time targets for them going later into the year, into the trade deadline, to really enhance their center depth and give them a much better chance at having success in the playoffs? To me, I also think in order to have playoff success, I think it's important they finish first in their division and get a different team. Like if they can avoid even the Bruins right now. Yes, the Bruins have not had a good start to the year. If they squeak in as like a wild card team or something, and Toronto's the first and that lines up again, I would still have my concerns. They just seem to be the Leafs' kryptonite. So, you don't really want to see them playing one of those teams. You want to see them play somebody different. Like if one of the other teams gets in the playoffs especially as a wild card in the Atlantic, like if we're looking like the Sabres or the Senators or any of those guys manage to get in there, that would be a good matchup for the Leafs. Or maybe they cross over and maybe they get a wild card team from the Metro. Maybe it's the Islanders, or maybe it's one of the weaker teams that are kind of squeaking in over there. That would be your ideal scenario. And if they can finish first, they have a better shot at getting through that and maybe having a better path to have success. So we'll see what happens. But let me know your thoughts on the Leafs. Do you think that a Kadri or O'Reilly is the kind of player this team is missing? And does it make sense that's what they're going to go after to make the big ad here later in the season? Give me your mock trades. Give me your thoughts on each of these guys. Which one should they go after? Which one do you think is more reasonable that they can actually land? Let me know your thoughts on that and everything else discussed here today in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time.